Welcome to episode 23, the Jordan number of Rail Talk. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. The NFL was postponing games because of cold weather. I say soft. We would never postpone a podcast because of weather. I am sitting in a heated room in a t-shirt, but come on, still.
You're in a heated room and I'm in Ocala, Florida. But yeah, we would never cancel for cold weather.
It out.
Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable. Joe, I feel like I've been on the road for 23 days since you mentioned the number 23. But tomorrow, I am going to go over and watch all of our namesakes gallop and breeze for the very first time, gallop on Mark Cassie's racetrack. And I will present video of Change at Jamaica, Bury the Lead, who else? Mean to Me. Burner account. And of course, because Patty named this one, the lamest horse that we have that ended up with a foot bruise that isn't working out anymore is, of course, Naval Hospital. So I'll get video of everyone in traffic and in action except for him.
That's okay. It's early. It's very early. And hopefully he gets better sooner than Patty got better from COVID because our girl's going through it. Rail Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade. We talked about the TaylorMade Stallion roster last week, obviously headlined by Not This Time, but plenty of other options at some lower price points that can get you a really nice horse. Some really exciting young stallions by great stallions themselves are coming up, and I think you'd be really well served to peruse that entire stallion roster. And like I said, the website is tremendous. Like, you got to go check it out just for that, to see the virtual stallion catalog. It's awesome. Obviously, TaylorMade is at the forefront of the sales industry as well. They were the leading consignor at several major sales last year. They've been doing this for 40 years, have the best reputation, I think, in the business of any of the consignors. And it's because they always put their customers first and their horses first. At the same time, they did so for our buddy Jon Green and Len Green and DJ Stable, and they'll continue to do so for you if you have a horse to sell. Any sale, hit up the Taylor family and TaylorMade Farm. They'll take care of you like your family. All right, very, very slow news week. I know I said that last week, but I'd be dying for some Kentucky Derby or Preakness news this week. But there was some pretty good racing action on the track as we get marginally closer to the Kentucky Derby. We're about 3.5 months away, as I struggle to do the math off the top of my head. There's some nice performances, I think, of Muth in the San Vicente about a week and a half ago. We're moving closer to the Holy Bull and the Gulfstream prep. So I think in the next month, the action will really start to pick up. But there was a maiden winner on Saturday at Gulfstream that I thought was very, very impressive. Didn't win by a lot, but if you watch the race and you see the trip that he had, you could see how impressive he was. And Jon Green and DJ Stable, who had a very, very good weekend at Gulfstream, winning several races. I don't know, like the strongest horse that you had a connection to might be this one. Why don't you tell people about another horse that might be in the Derby in a couple months?
Yeah, Joe. I mean, it was a jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring race. Conquest Warrior, who won. It got the worst of trips. I mean, if you watch the race, or if you watch the finish, you say, oh, he won by half a length, big deal. But if you watch the race, he broke dead last, had all kinds of trouble, got checked 2 or 3 times, depending on who you're asking, and then went 5-6 wide and zapped the horse at the end. But just big horse, big long stride, $1 million yearling. And I'm going to sound weird when I say this, but when you sell a horse for a lot of money, it's obviously a good thing, but you hope that homebred goes to a good program. And certainly Cortland Farms, the owner, and Shug McGahee, the trainer, have done everything right as far as not pushing this big horse until he was ready. He ran once at Aqueduct in December, and then they brought him down to Florida, and he just looks like the real deal. And I know, you never bet the futures. You never bet on a specific horse in January for the Derby. But Joe, I got to tell you, he ran a very impressive race. And Shug has been to the big dance before. He knows how to campaign a big 2-turn kind of horse. And I couldn't be more excited. Also, we have the 2-year-old half brother who's a Nyquist. And we'll talk to Elizabeth Masi, later on. But Nyquist, who stands at Darley, and that colt is named Brodeur after the very famous Devils hockey goalie, the Hall of Fame goalie. But I digress. Conquest Warrior, really super impressive. I would recommend watching the race. And I think he posted like an 83 or 84 buyer.
Yeah, I mean, it's like not indicative of how well he ran, and it's just so impressive because he's, like you said, he's a bigger horse. For a bigger horse to be able to get stopped multiple times in traffic like that, and then start his momentum again, and to be able to motor down the stretch like he was, not get discouraged. And you just watch Jose Ortiz riding the horse in the stretch. It's not like he was riding the hair off him. Once he got him to the outside, he was just like, he knew he was going to run down that horse. And I think the runner up is probably pretty nice for Todd Pletcher as well. Yeah, so he was crazy impressive. And it's interesting you bring up the future bets, because a horse like Conquest Warrior is the reason that the field is favored in the future bets all the way up until probably the last one, when you start to get more interest on the individual horses, because he wasn't one of the individual interests, and he pops up in mid-January in the maiden race, and now I'm struggling to come up with a horse that I think is more impressive. Maybe Fierceness is the only one that I've seen that's been more impressive so far, but he's right up there with them. We also had some foaling news, and as John mentioned, we're going to have Elizabeth Masi, who works at Jonabell Farm at Darley, as the stallion coordinator. We're going to have her on in a little bit. But over in my neck of the woods, West Point partially owned Flightline had his first foals hit the ground this weekend. I believe we have some video of his first foal. It was a filly out of Juju's Map, who we remember was a grade 1 winner for the Albaws. And it's obviously very, very cute and very sweet video. If we could like chime in some like Rockabye Baby sound there, although I don't know, maybe that's not public domain, but that's like, it's so exciting. And first of all, adorable, but also so exciting when you see the first foals, but especially for a sire like Flightline, because, you know, there's a recent comparison in terms of Triple Crown winners, because everyone was like super stoked to get American Pharaoh and Justifies babies on the ground. But I don't know, just in terms of like raw talent, I don't think that there's been I don't think there's any stallion that anyone has been more excited for to see the foals hit the ground than Flightline. And also just because he's just so well bred, you know, being by Tappet out of a Indian Charlie mare that was a graded stakes winner. I mean, it's going to be hard to live up to that expectation. But then again, like the mares that he's gotten have been terrific as well. So I don't know, John, what would you consider like a successful freshman season for Flightline? Because I think, so I'm trying to do the math, 2026 is when the horses will first race. You've been around this game for a long time. You've seen a lot of hyped up first season stallions. Like what would be successful for him?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Joe, there's two hurdles that his foals are going to have to overcome. First and foremost, when they become yearlings, he's going to have like a $250,000, $300,000 average. Because if you're in there on your 2-3 times stud fee, then you know at that price point, that means that people are making money, and that's a good thing going forward. It also, more importantly, means that the foals really look good and they look the part. And like you mentioned, he had a phenomenal book of mares, so they should pedigree well, they should catalog well. But you know that would be the first bogey, is the yearling sales, that he's somewhere in that $250,000, $300,000 average. And I think there's going to be, my guess is there's going to be, 100 to 130 of them that are going to be offered. So it's not an easy task for sure. And then when they're 2-year-olds, and even though Flightline, was a later developing horse, the market is going to expect for his foals to do well early. So he's going to need to have, a grade 1 winner in his first crop. Doesn't have to be the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but it needs to be one of the preps or one of the races. I almost said in New York, but we know that have all been downgraded. It's going to be one of the races in Kentucky. To be a grade 2, grade 1 kind of horse, and to have that hype, because you got to figure that as the Flightlines get older and the races get longer, they're going to perform better. So I think it's twofold. One farm that was really good at definitely handling the first part was Airdrie Farm was phenomenal about, putting their best yearlings in sales, especially the early sales, and to try to get that multiple, 3, 4, 5 times stud fee. And you start to get the hype of what was going on. And then it was up to the horses themselves to see if they could race. But those are the two tests, Joe, that I think that those foals have to overcome. The first foal, was it a colt or a filly?
It was a filly.
It was a filly. Okay, good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, right then and there, just because of the lineage, that foal doesn't have to do anything, and it's still going to be
Right.
very valuable as a broodmare.
Right. Yeah. I always tell people, like, if you're trying to hit a home run, buy a colt. If you're trying to hit a lot of singles and doubles, buy some fillies. Yeah, they just, in general have the greater residual value over time. And yeah, I would like to see his foals also, have longevity on the racetrack, because that's the only criticism that anybody could ever have about Flightline, is that, he only raced 6 times and he never had any like major physical issues, just like some nagging things along the way that, reasonably so, the connections didn't want to risk him in any way possible. So I'd like to see his foals, have great 2-year-old seasons, but then also have great 3 and 4-year-old seasons too, because I think that'll probably establish him as the leading sire of his generation if that happens. One more news note I wanted to mention. So there are some new kind of initiatives in racing to get more young people involved. And to tell a positive story of racing. There's a story in the Blood Horse today about a new initiative called Light Up Racing. And it's a new industry group that, I'm quoting from the story here, that stepped forward to try to shape racing's message and ensure that misinformation is countered through education and factual information. Involved with this are Price Bell of Mill Ridge Farm, bloodstock agent Roderick Walkman, bloodstock agent Jason Litt, and vet Dr. Jeff Burke. I'm not familiar with those guys too much. Maybe you are a little bit more than me, John. But this is in the vein of Vicki Leonard and what she has tried to do with Kick Up for Racing in Australia, because there was a lot of criticism of racing in Australia, where racing is much more healthy, relatively speaking, than America, but still needed a counter voice to some of the criticism that they were getting. And John actually had a great conversation with Vicki Leonard for one of our breakaway rail talks that you should go back and watch. But John, first of all, how successful has her initiative been in Australia? And then, how emulable, is that a word? How replicable that's a word for sure. How replicable is it, do you think, for something like Light Up Racing to do that in America?
I think that with every metric, it's been successful in Australia. And the reason being is because they basically, over the past couple of years, have quashed the majority of negativity that's been coming out, from a lot of the industry haters. I don't know, the groups that don't want racing to be around anymore. And the fact that they centralized the message for their industry was imperative in making those strides. And I would love to see that replicated here in the States, and ultimately, be the voice, be the go-to. So when there is a 60 Minutes piece on, they're the ones, Light Up Racing or the American equivalent is where you go to get a quote on it. There's this specter of this, this new expose that's going to be coming out sometime in 2024 that's going to damn the industry again. Well, then we need to have our ducks in a row and have a centralized voice to combat it and discuss it. So that way, the facts are out there. And that's really the most important thing. I was pleased to see some of the names that are on the initial team. I think that they are well represented from not only the breeders, but pinhookers, veterinarians, and owners. So I think they did a good job in picking people that will be able to add value and add a voice to the messages. And I guess time will tell, but I'm cautiously optimistic that that we're going to be able to replicate that here in the States.
Yeah, no doubt. And there needs to be education of the public as much as that can possibly be done. I think the worry is that you don't want a propaganda outfit,
right?
That doesn't even acknowledge racing's issues. But then the flip side of that is you get like you said, the 60 Minutes piece, where theoretically you think it's going to be fair-minded and balanced, and it was mostly a hit job on racing, like an uninformed hit job. So you just need more people with skin in the game, younger people who have an interest of racing being successful for the long term, armed with information and, like you said, like they were saying in the article, like you're saying, like a repository of places that people can go
Yes.
when they have peer-to-peer conversations with friends, family members, strangers, whoever it is, when they have criticisms or questions about racing, to be like, well, actually, yeah, we're working on our issues. Here's the progress that we've made along the way. And I think that's huge. And in that vein, HISA has established a next generation advisory group that's going to be made up of people in the early to mid stages of their professional careers to provide feedback to HISA, the executive team, the standing committees about the implementation of HISA's rules and regulations. So that's kind of similar, where it's like, you need some new blood that can see where racing is going if we take this path or that path, and to be able to step in and have some kind of influence, because the old guard, like, if they're gone in 15, 20 years, like they don't have that same kind of long-term interest that young people do. And this is an industry that I think has hemorrhaged a lot of young people in recent years who don't necessarily see a path forward for the sport. So I definitely applaud any new initiative like this. So shout out to the people that have started Light Up Racing. We'll see what actually comes to fruition. But I just think, like you're saying, more centralized information and PR, the more of that we get, the better. It's imperative for the industry going forward.
Yeah. And Joe, let me just add a serious note on this as well. I'm glad to see that they're putting together younger people that have a passion for the industry and can add value to the industry. The only thing I'm annoyed about, and this is with all sincerity, is that you're not on that board. There's no way in my mind that you have such a good insight in the industry, and we have such a great platform here to discuss it. It just didn't. I don't know if they didn't reach out to you or if they, but I hope that for the powers that be that are watching this, that when there's a new board put together or they need additional voices, Joe Bianca needs to be at top of that list, because he covers a lot of different parts of the industry that I think would add value. And you know what? He can actually put a turn of phrase together a little bit occasionally as well.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. My only explanation is it's anti-Italian discrimination. But
discrimination, man.
No, I mean, yeah, I'm a young guy, not too many gray hairs. Like, I got a platform. What else do you need to see, people? But no, thank you, John, for saying that. And yeah, there's plenty of smart young people in this industry, aside from myself, who have the talent, the wherewithal, the skills, and the mindset to take this sport into a more prosperous, more promising future. Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. There's one reason that they're #1. No other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. Len Green owns over 200 horses, including several Rail Talk horses that we're particularly fond of. DJ Stables won over 2,500 races, started racking that up closer to 2,600 with the big weekend they had at Gulfstream. And the Green Group's got over 800 clients because they make them money and save them taxes. And there's a special offer for listeners of Rail Talk. Len is offering a complimentary and confidential half-hour consultation, guaranteeing you'll get value. Hit them up, 732-634-5100. Unequivocally guarantees he'll find you value and savings. He'll donate to your favorite charity or whatever you want. If he doesn't, he's not worried. He's always found value. He knows he can do it for you. And Rail Talk family, like I said, this is exclusive to you. Len Green and the Green Group will set you up for the tax season. Only a couple of months away from tax day, so get on the line with them right now. Nobody does it better in the business than Len Green and the Green Group. So we are thrilled to bring this next guest into the Rail Talk studio, appropriately dressed for the weather that we're all facing these days, and the frosted hat. You got it going on. Elizabeth Masi, the Stallion coordinator for Jonabell Farm. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Happy to be here.
We're so stoked to have you, and it's breeding season, it's foaling season, so we're going to ask some progressively stupider questions about the breeding and foaling process. But first, I would like to get to know you a little bit and how you got into racing and horses.
Sure. So I am actually from just outside of Seattle, Washington, which is just the haven of thoroughbred racing, right?
I was going to say, yeah.
But I grew up doing show jumpers all up and down the West Coast to Arizona and Canada, and then went to school at Virginia Tech and studied animal science. And as one does when you graduate, you go, what to do next? And packed up the car and went to Kentucky to do the horses. So decided it was a venture that I didn't know much about because I was so into the show world, but I've obviously loved it and have stuck with it. So
it's worked out for you. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
John, go ahead.
So Elizabeth, what a lot of the audience I don't think realizes is that you're like an air traffic control person for the Stallion.
Yeah, great way of putting it.
So your job is fill in the blank. My job is to blank, and it takes me blank hours a week to do it.
Well, I could tell you what my dad says I do. I don't know if it's appropriate.
No, go ahead.
When I got the job and I was telling and explaining it to him, he said, "Okay, kid, so you're a pimp?" And I said, "I would prefer madam, but that's fine."
You put that in her title at the bottom, Elizabeth's parentheses horse pimp.
Yes, could we please?
Oh, man.
I think it works. So, during breeding season, which was obviously mid-February, beginning early February to the end of June, you're going all day. The stallions are breeding 3 days a week or 3 times a day, excuse me. And then, but you're fielding phone calls, probably 100 phone calls a day, trying to get every mare in. So it takes quite a bit. It would take, 5 months to get it done if you want to say everybody,
Right.
Yeah.
And then you take the other 7 months off for vacation. Is that?
That'd be nice. No, because we start contracting in October, and that is a full-time gig. And then, I help with our consignments in November and January with our mares that we sell with under Godolphin, and just sort of other things, and can kind of shoot into the racing department and help them if I need to, or, just try and be useful.
Yep. And coordinate perfect winter outfits, clearly.
And coordinate perfect winter outfits. Yeah.
That takes time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Shout out to Frosted, one of our faves. But so you were talking to Patty earlier, and you mentioned when the Darley Flying Starters come aboard, they're kind of shocked at how intense and drawn out the process is. What are some of like the frequently asked questions or some of their misconceptions? It doesn't have to be flying starters. It could be people that you give tours to. What are some of the things that kind of blow their mind when they tour a breeding and stallion farm?
Right. I think a common misconception is that we just get a phone call and we just say, "Yeah, sure, come." Like it's nothing, and then the mare just shows up, gets bred, and goes home. And there's so much, like I said, starting from October on, getting the contracts out, making sure they're returned and signed, and, the mare information sheets, all of that has to come into play. And then obviously, fortunately, they don't all come at once because it's staggered with your barons and your resteds and your maidens to your foaling mares. But I think there's so much minutia that goes into it that they just don't think of, that a lot of people wouldn't think of. And why would you? But, down to requirements, and requirements change. And she was a foaling mare in October, but now she's not. Now what needs to happen? Imported mares, that's a whole nother case that I have to go behind the scenes with the USDA and take care of all that kind of stuff. So I think they're just a little surprised that it's not just a vet helping and ultrasounding a mare and calling me up and saying, "Yeah, come on," and then off we go.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, just a quick follow up on that, because it's early in the foaling and breeding season. I would think it goes on to like late spring. Where are you at now? Like, what part of the process are you guys at right now?
So we are probably finishing up our contracting part with the Darley Stallions. And now I'm starting to field phone calls, making sure paperwork is in, wanting to know when we'll start breeding. I had one in December that called me and asked me, and I said, "You're making my eye twitch. It's not even 2024. Stop it." So, people just get really kind of amped up, and you kind of have to just calm them down, and, we'll get it sorted and figured out, and it'll be okay. So we generally say that we'll open on the 14th. And if you need a day or two beforehand, to give us a call. But, so we've got a little bit of time to get everybody rolling, but it's just personnel, making sure the weekends are scheduled for the whole season and doing all of that. behind the scenes. Yeah.
And on top of that, you have the additional difficulties of having first year stallions,
Yes.
older stallions,
Yeah.
and everything in between. So how do you know for the first year stallions? Like you guys are standing Cody's Wish and Proxy and Speaker's Corner and am I missing one?
Mystic Guide.
I missed a guy. Right, I missed a guy.
Speakers and Mystic are already covered a year, but yes.
Okay, that's right. Yeah. So last year with those two, and this year with Proxy and Cody, how do you when do you kind of get into a rhythm with them where you know, okay, they can be bred twice a day or 3 times a day, or I need to give them a day off? Like how does that all kind of develop? And I think it's year to year, right? Don't they all change on their as far as how potent they are.
Absolutely. It, with the 2 new boys, or anytime you have a new boy, they obviously get a test breeding beforehand and make sure everything is, working and in all capacities, and that they understand what's going on, because you can imagine it's a new field for them.
Right.
But which they both did very well at. And then you just kind of have to treat them like it's going to work. Like you just sort of rock and roll, and then you let them tell you. We always try to be very sort of conscientious and respectful of the stallions when they say, okay, I need a break, or, yes, I can keep going. And some of our stallions, Medaglia, I love, our old boy, he will flat out tell you, you've pushed me too far. I'm done. And I'm going to take 2 days off. And there is nothing any of you can do about it. And we go, yes, sir.
That's right. He's earned it.
And he's earned it. And of course he does it when, in May, when everybody's scrambling to get there at the worst possible time. Right. But you just respect it. And I've learned over the years that you learn the nuances of each stallion. And okay, so with Medaglia, for example, if he's had 6 days in a row of 3-a-day breedings, I'll try and block something off for him if at all possible, and let him have a night off or something like that. Sometimes we just have to power through, but we do try to listen to them first and foremost, obviously, right. Because if they are not doing it, then we're all.
Yeah. And do any of them have any specific preferences? Like I know Seattle Slew used to prefer a certain kind of mare, and Bolt d'Oro, prefers a mare that has a foal by its eye. So do any of them have any like nuances like that where they won't breed gray mares, or they love chestnuts or maidens?
Right. So I don't know if you remember, we had a stallion named Girolamo a few years ago. Mm-hmm. He loved, for lack of a better term, dirty mares. He did not want them cleaned up. He didn't want them spit shined. He wanted them out of the paddock. And we would say, please do not do anything to literally pull him out of the paddock. And they're like, it goes against everything I do. I know. But he also could tell when a mare was brought in artificially through Proston versus when she was coming naturally into heat, and did not care for those as much. He just wouldn't breed them. So fortunately now, knock on wood, most of our boys don't have those nuances, because that was frustrating at times.
What I'm hearing from Medaglia, Doro, and Girolamo is that the Italians are very specific in what they want,
and
which I can back up.
And very fertile.
Yes.
You are picking up on it. They know what they like.
Yep.
It is what it is. And, welcome to our world.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about the off season, because obviously the breeding season only goes for a certain amount of months. Mm-hmm. What's the stallion's life like when they're not breeding? Like, how much turnout time do they get? What kind of attention do they get outside of the breeding shed? Just what's it like for them when they're not breeding?
Well, yeah, no. So they get, I would say their turnout schedule kind of flops a little bit, where they get to be out in the most of the morning and come in, after lunch. Obviously in this weather, they won't get a bath, but when it's nice and hot out, they probably get a bath and cleaned up. And then we've got a lot of tours that will come through, that will come and see them, and breeders that will come out. So they get a sufficient amount of attention and adoration, which we all know they need.
Especially the Italians.
Especially the Italians. I see we have the same kind of eyebrows, so we're simpatico there.
Exactly.
And then we also have a aqua tread that we will put them on more during the off season to kind of help maintain their strength and back strength and everything like that. So they get work. But speaking of Medaglia and the Italian, he does not like being out too long. He doesn't like the heat. He's a finicky boy, but he deserves it.
He absolutely does. Now, let's pretend the cameras aren't on. Do you have a favorite and why?
Okay. Alive or past?
Anything. Anyone that you've worked with.
So my absolute favorite was Bernardini. And I know he retired shortly after I started here. I started the year before he retired. So he was my first real foray with the company into this game, and to be a Preakness winner and everything, and a homebred. Ran up to the barn, met him, and he was, I don't know if you've both had ever seen him or met him in person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Such a gentleman. I could have gotten on his back and ridden him around the farm. Just an absolute love bug, and which I know is not professional said, but I just adored him, and he was so easy to book and breed, and was fertile, and just could throw anything at him, and he was willing to take it on. So unfortunately, since he has passed, I will give it to his grandson, Maxfield, now. And he's living up to those shoes. He's got his eye, so I thought was the prettiest eye in the business. So I'm glad that he's here.
Gorgeous horse. And I can concur on Bernardini. I met him in the summer of Saratoga when he won the Travers and fell in love with him instantly. Just the nicest personality, but also exuded the class of a great racehorse. Like, you don't often get that total package,
You really don't. And he had this confidence and air about him, but there was no arrogance to it. And it was just sort of, it's okay. I gotcha. Mm-hmm. Come for the ride, and we'd go, okay.
A humble but confident king. We love that.
Right. That's right.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the foals, because obviously, guys, you have a lot of homebreds. Mm-hmm. We were doing a West Point call earlier today with Doc Iseman, and one of the questions was, how soon do the yearlings start to separate themselves in terms of ability? So I'm curious about foals, like, when they're first born, I assume they're all pretty similar, but then how soon do you start to be able to tell them apart in terms of, their temperament and maybe their potential on the racetrack?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And I think a lot of people would have a different personal answer to that, right? As to what they want to see in a horse. But I think you could especially during weaning, if you see how they handle the weaning process and what's thrown at them with that and how they handle themselves in the herd environment, I think you can really start to tell that this one is going to stand out a little bit. And of course, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, are there any that pop into your head that like really stood out early and turned out to be great?
Well, I unfortunately don't get to see ours as often as I would like to, since I'm here at the computer making the babies. But I know Essential Quality was one, because he foaled out here at Jonabell. He was one that really stood out and had that sort of confidence and charm to him, if you will, with a little bit of naughtiness.
Yeah, gotcha.
And he actually was a cute little story. His mother, his dam, always likes to bury her foals in the stall in hay when they go down for a nap. And apparently when he was on the track, he would bury himself under his hay in the stall when he was taking a nap. Probably doesn't want me telling you that, but it's a cute story.
Oh, that's great.
That's sweet.
I know. Yeah.
Elizabeth, I think you've been outstanding. Everything that you've been built up to by everyone in the industry. They have definitely have a lot of support and confidence in everything you do. And I know from breeding mares at Darley for longer than I want to admit, because I'd be aging myself. But when Bernardini first started breeding, that's when we first started working with you guys.
Wow.
And it's been a pleasure to be able to work with you and Kate Galvin, one of my favorite people in the industry. And I think you guys just have a phenomenal program, from breeding to racing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been here. I've started my 19th year, and I always tell people I'm starting to figure out if I like it or not, but I'll get back to you. But I love working here. It's a great, as you said, a great operation. And we've been on a really fun ride these past few years with our homebreds. And so I'm really lucky to be here and have such great clients as you.
Well, it was great to have you. Great to get to know you and get to know the breeding and foaling process. And come back anytime. Thanks, Elizabeth.
I would love to. Good to see you guys.
Rail Talk is sponsored by Fasig-Tipton. We talked last week about the digital sales, which you should always have on your radar in terms of nominating horses for those sales that. For the buyers, they don't have to have taken out a training, turnkey horses, as we say, and Fasig's at the forefront of all the digital sales. So definitely go check those out and nominate if you have some horses that you think fit. But also, we have the next physical sale is the Kentucky Winter Mix Sale, and Fasig has cataloged an additional 33 supplemental entries to its sale, which is going to be held February 5th and 6th in Lexington. The hips are $417 to $450. Got a couple of nice six-figure earners in there, daughters of some really nice stallions with some good pedigree. So definitely check that out. And I think, as the weather warms up, those sales are only going to grow and grow and grow in importance and attention. So you might be able to find some bargains in the next sale before the attention really gets on the major sales. You might be able to find some nice broodmare prospects and some nice racing prospects coming up at the Kentucky Winter Mix Sale, February 5th and 6th in Lexington. All right, so we're going to bring our friend back on. He threatens to overshadow us on our own podcast. He introduced the most popular new segment in podcast history last week, Tackle or Trade. Special correspondent of Rail Talk, Skip Anderson, welcome back.
Hey, Joe. Hey, John. Glad to be back.
Oh, so good to have you at the ready all the time. And the great news is we solicited some questions for Tackle or Trade from the audience last week, and y'all came through. Rail Talk listeners and viewers are the best in the business, and they hit up Skip via DM and gave him some questions. So keep doing that, and we'll keep answering them. Skip, take it away. I think we got to toss the coin first.
Yeah, we're going to toss the coin here, but let's go over the rules of Tackle and Trade before we get started. We've got two questions we're going to ask. I'm going to flip a coin. The winner of the coin toss gets to go first. That person has the choice to tackle that question or trade it to their partner. If they trade it to their partner has to answer it, and then that person stuck back answering the second question. So put some strategy to the game here. Let's flip a coin. John, you get to call it today.
Okay. I'm going to go with tails.
It is tails. So, John, you are the coin toss winner. And we're going to ask you the first question. And that first question comes from our friend Steph, with a lot of names, burner account, submitted a question. And her question is, if you could mate two living horses today, who would you mate and why?
I'm going to trade that.
All right. He trades it to Joe. So, Joe, if you could trade two living horses today, who would you mate and why?
So I can't say change a Jamaica and burner account, right? Because that's creepy because they're only 2 years old.
That's a little incestuous. Yeah.
Okay. I got to go with Flightline just because he's all the rage nowadays. And as for the mare, let's see who was Rachel Alexandra. I would like Flightline and Rachel Alexandra to have a baby because the thing might win the Kentucky Oaks or the Kentucky Derby by 40 lengths, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what I'm going with.
All right. Good answer.
And the nice thing about it is if you go onto Arian.com, you could actually put those that hypothetical mating together and see exactly what it would look like.
Wow. Seamlessly working the sponsor in. You guys are the best in the business. All right.
All right, John, here's your question. This one comes from author Kim Wickens, former guest on the show. And she wants to know, John, what is the best food item to eat at Saratoga?
Oh, at Saratoga. I would have to say the best food to eat at Saratoga. is definitely the meatballs at the, I can't remember the name of the place. That there's a little Italian place. Joe, you'll appreciate I said it's an Italian place. That's right by the Embassy Suites. You just walk across the parking lot and it's right there. And they serve meatballs, but there's like a dozen different kinds, and you can order 3 of them, and that's like a whole meal. It's like a pound of meat. Damn it, I can't remember the name of the place, but I know that it's like $12 for three meatballs. So if they were sponsoring us, I'd remember. So if you own that restaurant and you want to, reach out to us and let us know.
Look out the window, see if you're across from the Embassy Suites, and if so, hit us up, and then maybe you can sponsor. For me, I know you didn't ask me, but for me, the only thing that I definitely have to get every time I'm in Saratoga is a Hattie's chicken sandwich. That's the top of the list. I don't know if it's the best thing to eat in Saratoga, but it's definitely the thing that I want to get every single time I'm there.
Joe, where did you work at Saratoga? What food? Was that it?
Carolina barbecue.
Okay.
I was slinging barbecue, and it doesn't exist anymore, at least not at Saratoga. But yeah, that was my first job at the racetrack, and that's what brought me here, weirdly. Set me on this path.
Barbecue always brings people together.
It's true. I was a barbecue.
So, Joe, what's a secret barbecue recipe, or what's your go-to barbecue food?
The pulled pork is always a winner. I mean, to me, barbecue is mostly, as long as it's like tender, it's mostly about the sauce. Mm-hmm. Like there's a place here in Brooklyn that maybe I'll take John to if he's not too scared, called Bark Barbecue. It's actually a really nice neighborhood. It's down by the water, and it's like the really, really nice tender meat, but the sauces are so banging. You got to have great sides too. Mm-hmm. Like that's what I like about barbecue is it's like a full meal. It's a holistic approach to eating garbage. That's what I like.
Nice. All right.
Skip,
was that one more food question?
Was that off script? Are you ad-libbing now?
Of course.
You are a man of many talents.
He didn't get the job. He didn't get the job because he couldn't ad-lib. Like, come on.
Yeah.
He's on it.
Yeah, we're learning about each other. That's what this is about, to get in the heads of John and Joe for our listeners.
And finding out how much room is there.
So since we're on the food topic, let's go one more from Kim Wickens. She wants to know, is it bread pudding or chili when at Keeneland?
Oh, it's easily burgoo. It's burgoo. It's not even chili, Kim. It's burgoo. That's the Kentucky chili. You got to have that. That's a must have. Whether it's 110 degrees out in the shade or it's 30 below, with the winter winds at Keeneland, burgoo just warms your tummy.
All right.
Yeah. I haven't eaten enough at Keeneland to fairly answer that question, but so I'll defer to John until I'm hopefully back down there.
You don't look like this without eating a lot of food at Keeneland. Okay. This is Body by Keeneland.
John, you look great, especially after you grew the beard to look like me.
You look like you. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I look less like Oliver and more like you. Sorry, Skip. We're interrupting your piece. I'm sorry.
Hey, no problem. And let's wrap it up with one more question that comes from Kim. Grays, bays, or chestnuts? What's your favorite?
In women or horses?
We got to wait to do Rail Talk After Dark later, Josh. Remember, this is a different show.
Am I going first? Is it for me to tackle our trade, or is
let's give it? Yeah. Let's let John tackle this one.
Okay. I've always loved grays. Our very first Grade 1 winner was gray. Do It With Style, and Jaywalk was the champion. Was also gray. So I have a real affinity for gray horses. If there's ever a time where you have to choose between a gray and something else, 4 times out of 5 I'm gonna pick the gray. Just because to me that always like burgoo, it warms my heart.
And I love grays too. I love a good chestnut. I love a good dark bay, like a really like strapping dark bay, like Maxfield. And I like grays as well. And the West Point partners like grays. They're like the easiest ones to sell. And we bought 0 gray horses last year. None. I don't like 50 plus horses. So I'm hoping we bring some into the stable this year because the people love them.
Yep.
All right, Skip. Excellent follow-up to your first segment. Well, there was no Kermit impression this time, but
not this time.
You want to throw something? All right.
We'll work on it.
You have another week to workshop another Muppet impression, and then it'll be
I
the
can
most
do
popular
one. I can do
we've ever
one.
had.
I can do one.
Go ahead, John.
Spurdy, birdie, 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 birdie.
Sounds got food on the brain.
Bark, 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 bark.
Wow.
That was
There's
Fozzie
no
Bear.
topping that.
That was Fozzie Bear.
Oh, I thought that was a Swedish
That was
chef.
a Swedish chef.
Oh, okay. Got you. You're. that was some
Ah,
misdirection.
funny.
Wow.
Ah.
Wow. Am I the only one here who can't do a bunch of Muppet impressions? I'm feeling very
When
inadequate.
you have kids, you learn Muppet voices and Elmo voices and and Blue's Clues. You learn them all.
Well, that's never happening, so I don't have to worry about
There you
that. Maybe that's another question we can get into next time. Skip, thanks for stopping by and peppering us with some more tackle or trade.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. And Rail Talk Nation, if you want to ask these guys some questions, hit me up with a DM at Baba Acres. We'll get it in tackle or trade. Talk to
Let's
you later.
go. All right, so that's going to do it for episode 23 of Rail Talk. We made a great show out of very little news. I'm proud of all of us. So thank you to my co-host, Jon Green. Thank you to Skip Anderson for stopping by. Thank you to our producer, Patty Wolf. Our associate producers, Anthony LaRocca, Aaliyah LaRocca, and Nathan Bogans. And also thank you to Elizabeth Masi from John Bell Farm for coming through and teaching us about breeding and foaling. We'll see you next week back here on Rail Talk.